So, hello and welcome back to our show Beyond the Classroom with OnCourse Vantage. For all of our listeners, introducing our guest for today, Farhaan Amaria. Farhaan has just finished his first year at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business, specializing in the fields of finance and operations analytics. Farhaan is a curious learner, an avid reader, and analytical thinker, and is currently interested in exploring the world of investment banking, private equity, private credit, and consulting. So, Farhaan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Radhika. Hi. Thanks for that comprehensive introduction.
Awesome. So, to get started, can you actually just take us through what made you decide on finance and operations analytics as your major choices?
That's a good question. I'd say I was always really interested in any vertical really within the field of business and business administration.
Right.
And the reason finance really appealed to me is because, I didn't know anything about finance heading into Georgetown. I knew a bit of what it was, but I'd never worked on it. I'd never done any kind of internship relating to the field of finance. So I was curious. I knew it was a lucrative field because a lot of people go into it, but
Right.
I wasn't really sure. And then when I joined Georgetown, through a lot of on-campus meetings and club organizations, etc., I figured out what finance actually was. And if I had to put it simply, um, if you look at the world, generally there's people with ideas, so like businesses with ideas. Then there's people with money who have capital, and finance is kind of the intermediary between the two. So you bring those two groups of people together, and that really appealed to me. Working with numbers has also been something that I wouldn't say good at, because a lot of people are good at it, but I like it. So um, yeah, that's kind of why I decided to go into finance. And for operations analytics, it was pretty much it. It's a complementary field, really. If you're in finance, you're going to be dealing with numbers, and you might as well take OPAN as your second major, especially because it gives you the STEM OPT extension for 2 years. That's kind of the main reason why I took it. I won't lie, but yeah, that's pretty much why I took finance in OPAN.
Got it. So, both passionate and strategic choices. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Yeah. Now, Georgetown, of course, is more widely known for its international relations, politics, the typical liberal arts courses that, would do really well with that DC background. So, can you actually tell us a little bit more about what the business program at McDonald's like, and tell us a little bit more about your experience and, how do you think Georgetown's business school compares to NYU Stern, UPenn Wharton? Those finance programs, and why did you really apply to Georgetown for business?
Just kind of starting off on that question, I had the same conception when I went in August, but then I kind of Georgetown kind of opened my eyes when I really landed there. I saw that, of course, there's a lot of this government and international relations focus in the general university, but once you're in the McDonough School of Business, it is a pure business school. If you want to do finance, you do finance. If you want to do accounting, you can do accounting. Um, there's no influence, I'd say, or any push to move towards any sort of hybrid between finance and international relations or whatever. That said, we have a major called I think it's Business and Global Affairs, which is a joint degree from the McDonough School of Business and the Walsh School of Foreign Services.
Right.
But I wasn't too interested in that, so I just went for the pure business route. But yeah, uh, Georgetown, we do have a few requirements where Georgetown wants us to test the waters of IR and government. But after that, if you don't want to do it, there's no compulsion. And
Right.
McDonough, as a business school, as a pure business school, is one of the best, I think. I'm obviously biased, but if there was a Poets and Cons report that came out a couple of months ago, and it said we were the second best undergraduate business program in the country in the US after Wharton. So um, that's kind of testament to how Georgetown's been able to separate, if what it's of course known for and what it's really good at from business, and it's actually becoming really good at business as well. And just touching upon how it's different from Stern and Wharton, I can't speak too much for that since I haven't attended those places. I do have friends there at both
Right.
Stern and Wharton, so from what I've heard, they're actually pretty similar. Maybe Georgetown is a more holistic first year um, first year experience. At least I know Wharton also requires you to do a bit of philosophy, etc. in the first year, but Georgetown goes to the next level. We have to do classes in theology and other social sciences that you wouldn't have expected to do. So all we have to do is test those classes out. We've got just one or two requirements from those. Once you
Mhm.
finish those, if you don't want to do it, you don't need to do it. So that's how it's different from Penn and Stone, I'd say. And also the culture. I'll touch upon that a bit later, but it's like any business school, it's competitive, but everyone wants you to succeed, which is something that I really, really liked here.
Nice. Yeah, that actually is, quite different, I think, from the other more competitive business schools, if you found that supportive community here. But yeah, thanks. I think that's a really comprehensive answer. So, also like in terms of the foreign policy and the more international perspective that Georgetown has that you mentioned, do you feel like this finds its way into the like business classrooms in a certain way? Like, do you feel like it's is that something that plays out, and has that enhanced your understanding of business in any way as a student?
It does actually. When I said that you don't have to go down that route, what I meant was that you don't have to take that as your major, but in your classes, a lot of discussion is actually driven based on government decisions and foreign policy related things. Just being more global minded. Global minded is what I'd really say Georgetown pushes you to do, and not in a pure politics sense. It's just from a business angle. It's if this institution wants to operate in this country, but this country has X policy, how do you think this company could mitigate these risks, or do you think
Right.
it could succeed in this arena or whatever? So a lot of discussions are driven based on that. Often people will just start going off on a tangent on things like that, but it's really nice. I think it's a blend between the two in the classroom discussion, but then in our exams and tests, etc. I haven't seen much of foreign policy related things. It's been pure business courses, pure business questions, etc. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that it does, still make its way into classroom discussions, and that
it
focus
does.
that's related to its entire mission as a school, does play out in your day-to-day discussions. Yeah, so, now coming back to what you mentioned about the community at Georgetown. So if you can, expand on that culture a little bit more, is it quite international? How do you feel? As a student there in terms of coming from an international background, how welcomed and accepted and integrated do you feel, and also how engaged are you with student clubs and organizations on campus?
Yeah, Georgetown, of course, with its focus on foreign policy, has to be one of the most internationally focused schools out there, and they live up to their word in that sense. There's I don't know the exact statistic, but I've counted students from at least 20 countries in the world, and it's
Wow.
probably more than that. So we have a lot of diversity in that sense. And the thing with Georgetown is that Georgetown is what you want it to be. So if you want to find a kind of community within campus, there are these organizations like the South Asian Society, which is where all of the South Asian countries people really find their home per se. So there's
Mhm.
these organizations where you can find like-minded people, people of the same interest as you, and yeah, that's kind of um, from a club's perspective. That's so we call it clubs and societies. So societies are basically um, free for all. You can enter without any application, and it's basically so like we have a Hindu student association as well, which I'm a part of, even though I'm not a Hindu.
Yeah.
It's very open in that sense. So yeah, that's a broad community at Georgetown, and within the McDonough School of Business, like I said, everyone is extremely smart. Georgetown is an academically rigorous place,
Yeah.
and you have to be um, technically sound to succeed at Georgetown, especially in the McDonough School of Business. But I've heard stories of, I won't name these business schools, but a lot of people just trying to tear each other down and making sure, especially with recruiting. Recruiting is one of the most competitive
True.
time periods at Georgetown. And the thing with Georgetown is that every student wants every other student to succeed as well, which is really nice. And it's not just limited to the current students, but also um, alumni. Georgetown has an incredibly large network of alumni, and they are so happy to reach out to you in whichever way or help you in whichever way is possible. So I've not done this yet. I want to do it, but I've heard stories of people connecting with managing directors of companies through LinkedIn. If they're a fellow Hoya, which is what we call ourselves, they'll be
Yeah.
happy to reach out and help a fellow Hoya out. There's no there's no malice. There's of course a bit of competition, but everyone just there's a really nice culture in the business school at least. And so, like I was saying, there's societies, which is basically more free for all based on your identity, and then there's clubs, which is a massive part of Georgetown. This is what I did not know heading into Georgetown is that
Mhm.
pre-professional clubs are some of is probably the most eye-opening experience for me at Georgetown. It's you just within your first month at Georgetown, you're recruiting for these clubs, and these clubs are like they're like. So I'll give you an example. There's clubs in the consulting field. There's clubs in the finance field. There's clubs in the accounting field, and then of course in the other schools there's different clubs. But these clubs are really rigorous because they have acceptance rates of like 3 to 5% per semester, which is uh,
Wow.
extra.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's extremely tough to get in. Some, especially the club that I'm in, which is Ziba Investment Group. I had 3 rounds of interviews for a club. So
Wow.
that just speaks to how um, committed people are here. But if you don't
Yeah.
get in the first semester, you can apply again in the next semester, etc. So you can
Right.
find your kind of professional community at these clubs. But if you want a more uh, if you want to see people from your own country more often, you can join the societies. Those are free for all, and you can get in, and everyone's happy to have you there.
Wow, wow, that's really enlightening to hear about, the whole club system. But okay, so now just expanding on that, can you actually take us through a day in your life at Georgetown? What does it look like?
Sure. I mean, it kind of depends on the day of the week because Mondays and Wednesdays tend to be the business heavy days, and Tuesdays, Thursdays, and sometimes Fridays are the non-business days. So, like I said, we in our first year we're supposed to take a few non-business courses. So I've taken a theology class so far. I've taken a government class. I've taken a philosophy class. So those are the classes that tend to be on the Tuesdays and Thursdays. So
Right.
typically, I'd wake up uh, pretty close to the start of my class time. I don't have much time to get breakfast or whatever, so I just have a quick oatmeal in the room or something, and then head to my class. And everyone's pretty much on time, so you can't be too late to classes.
Right.
And the thing with Georgetown is that the classes are so small. It's not there's of course a few lecture classes which are like 100 people, but I'd say that's been 10% of my classes so far. All my other classes are between um, 10 people to 35 people around that range. So it's a very intimate environment. The classroom, everyone interacts with each other. There's a lot of group projects. So
Mm-hmm.
I typically do a few classes in the morning. One class at around 9:30 in the morning that goes on till 12, and then I'd get lunch at our dining hall, which is the Leo O'Donovan dining hall.
Yeah.
Then there's an afternoon class, and then there's an evening class. And the way I've structured my schedule is that I want each class to be spaced out in the sense that I have around an hour and a half or 2 hours between classes. So in in that free time, I get to do any assignments that I have, reading
Right.
up on the news. That's pretty important, and yeah, that's pretty much till 6 p.m. You're in classes, and then after 6 p.m. it's club stuff. So if you're in a club, you'll have club meetings, you'll have club events if there are any events, and yeah, that's pretty much a standard day in my life at Georgetown. I'd have dinner at around 7:30, which is ridiculously early as per
Yeah.
Indian standards, but uh, it's that's how everyone does it there. So you have to adapt there. But yeah, and then I'd say that's kind of during the week, and then of course Thursday onwards, there's a lot of parties, etc. I'd say Georgetown's not just academically focused. There's people have a lot of fun there, but people know how to separate the two. I think finding that balance is extremely important.
Yeah, wow. That sounds really like structured and balanced as a week. And it's nice to know that there are certain slots where everyone is doing fun things, on certain days where you have certain types of classes. So that's interesting. And Georgetown is a Jesuit institution, and you did mention you did a theology class, but and was that class required? If you can touch upon that, and if you
It
can also
was.
touch a little bit, it was required. So you do have to do one theology class.
We have to do two actually. So
Oh, okay.
I'll touch upon that. Yeah. So you can
Yeah.
complete your question.
So you have your two theology classes that are required, but beyond that, how does this impact your day to day in any way? And do you feel like this has changed your experience at college?
Sure. So Georgetown has a Jesuit history, and Georgetown is really proud of it. There's no shying away from it. We have a lot
Mhm.
of Jesuit focused events. There's this society on campus called the Campus Ministry, which is basically all religious services. So
Yeah.
Georgetown is a bit more religious than other universities, but there's no compulsion to follow any of these practices. You can do what you want. I'm personally speaking, I am religious, so I really like these events and these masses, etc. There's also regular artis that happen every Sunday. In the
Yeah.
It's organized by the Hindu Student Association, so we have a pandit ji who comes, who's a
Wow.
resident on campus. So there's like a small mandir as well, and yeah, so we have arti every Sunday, and yeah, so that's kind of the religious aspect. And there's this phrase that we have at Georgetown. We call it cura personalis, which is derived from Georgetown's Jesuit history. It basically means care for the whole person. So
Mm,
it's Georgetown is not just trying to develop you academically or in an IQ perspective, but also the EQ perspective. So the
right.
emotional quota or whatever they call it. Uh, there's a lot of resume workshops. That's not the best example because it's more of a professional thing, but I could just tell you that every professor out there, most of the professors out there, are really happy to help you after office hours, and even with any personal matters. There's just a lot of support in that sense. So cura personalis is a Jesuit phrase which basically means care for the whole person. So that's the
Got it.
reason why we take these theology classes or philosophy classes. We have to do two philosophy classes, two theology classes, and then either a government or a history class, two history or government classes. And people
Hmm.
tend to finish in the business school. People tend to finish these classes off in the first 2 years. So that's kind of just working your way through the core curriculum, and then you choose your major in the second year, and then Georgetown is whatever you want it to be. So yeah.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of that holistic development, and that's great that as a college, Georgetown cares so much about that, and not just your academic development. And who do you think fits really well into the Hoya community? Like, who's a good fit for Georgetown?
Uh, that's a tough question to answer. I'd say uh, anyone who's, of course, interested in living in DC, interested in exploring this kind of um, cool blend of, if course if you're talking about a business school, then a cool blend between business and government and other relations, international relations. But you know that there's such a wide variety of options of what you can do with Georgetown. Like I said, there's this phrase that I keep telling myself: Georgetown is what you want it to be, and
Mm,
it's just what you put into Georgetown is what you're going to get out of it. So if you're a hard worker, I'd say you would fit in at Georgetown because, like I said, it's academically rigorous. You will find yourself studying for exams, etc., till 4 in the morning, maybe even 5. So if you're okay with that, and honestly, if you're applying to places like Penn, Georgetown, you should be okay with that. That's kind of the person who would fit in. Also, the kind of person that would also fit in is just someone who cares about other people. You can't. I don't think you can be selfish at Georgetown. You can't just look at your own self and just try to get on the trajectory of in the professional sense. Of course, that happens. It should automatically happen, but you have to care about the people around you because that's that's the kind of community atmosphere at Georgetown. You have to care about other people. You can't be selfish there. And yeah, if you're open minded, I think you'd fit in at Georgetown.
gotcha. Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so I think we've understood everything about Georgetown now. Now let's actually zoom back to your time of applications, which was not too long ago. And an interesting part of your resume was that even before going off to business school, you've done a lot of internships across HR, finance, social entrepreneurship. So, what do you think was the benefit of exploring all of those different business verticals before even going off to business school?
I mean, firstly, I just say I was extremely lucky to get those internships because it's really hard to get any internships in India before college, even during college. So I was really, really lucky to get these internships, and I'm extremely grateful for that. and I just those internships just helped me understand how to work in a kind of team environment. I think more than the actual subject matter that you learn at these internships is the actual soft skills that you develop from it. So that's kind of what I. So like you said, my first internship was in the human resources department. That's where I dealt with a lot of people. Of course, it was online, but just developing this, I'd not say courage because it's not a hard thing to do, but just developing this habit of being open to reaching out to people, even if they're people at higher levels in the organization. Just having that confidence in you is something that my first internship developed, and then I did a social entrepreneurship internship as well, which is something that's close to my heart. I believe that giving back to society is the most important thing. So that's kind of internships just help you put things in perspective. It helps you also see, you have these theories, oh, I want to go into business, I want to go into government, but then when you do an internship, you realize, oh, maybe I don't want to do it, or maybe I do want to do it.
Yeah.
So these internships, I was really lucky to be able to, get an idea of that early on.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And great that you had that early on. And I lied. I will come back for one more question related to Georgetown. But how easy has it been, since coming to college to find internship opportunities? Like, does Georgetown have a career center? Is it super helpful with like finding these opportunities? And I know that's something you'll potentially now do in your second, third, and fourth year. But what have your seniors told you about that?
Yeah, so we have in the business school, we have this lady called Talia Schatz. She's
Mhm.
the assistant director of something. I don't know her designation, but she's kind of like your school counselor, your career counselor, and she knows a lot. So in your first year, it's not that easy to get an internship, especially in the US as an international student. Getting a job is one of the most difficult things. Even getting a full-time job is really difficult. So just internships in the first year, um, like I said, having Georgetown on your resume, being able to reach out to fellow Georgetown students really helps from the internship
Yeah.
perspective. But in the first year, you're pretty much, at least from what I've seen, international students typically tend to go back home and find opportunities at home. And from the second year onwards, that's kind of where recruiting technically starts. And
Right.
like I spoke about these pre-professional clubs, they're also a massive factor in helping you get a job because there's alumni of these clubs that know, of course, if you've got into a certain club, you have a certain um, level of knowledge per se. So they're happy to come down and chat with you, and they'll bump your resume up or just take coffee chats with you or something. That's from an internship perspective. I haven't really gone through much of that yet, so maybe you
Yeah.
can ask me in 1 year. So
Yeah.
we can make a list of what you want to ask me. But yeah, uh,
Yes, I made a mental checklist. Okay, awesome. So yeah, we'll go back now and just in terms of your Georgetown application, what do you think really stood out, and what was that one thing that potentially got you in?
I'll have to credit this to OnCourse only because I was really really bad at writing essays. I've never been inclined towards creative writing. I've liked it, but I've never been too good at it. So my mentors, Ashumi and Ashna, they were really really helpful in that sense. They told me exactly what to write in the sense that they weren't like, oh, write this sentence, write this idea down, but they told me what the the interviewer was really looking for. So just having that in the back of my mind and then writing my essays really helped me. So OnCourse, of course, has a lot of students in various
Mhm.
universities abroad, and they know y'all know what these universities want. So I say that's also the most important part of like college applications. Just your essays need to bring out who you are because I don't think, at least I'm not sure, but I don't think these colleges are looking for the smartest student or the most talented student or the person who can score the highest in the SAT or whatever. They're looking for the right fit. And as long as your essays can bring out who you are, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so now we're going to move on to a little bit more of a fun segment. Where we're going to ask you a few rapid fire questions. The first one is, what do you miss most about home?
Oh, my family, easily.
Okay, what is the funniest reaction that people have when you tell them that you're Parsi?
there's actually two different sets of reactions. So first, there's the category of person that does not know who a Parsi is, and they're like, "Oh, you're a Parsi. You don't look like a Parsi."
Hmm.
So that's the funniest reaction that I've had. If they don't, and of course at Georgetown, there's not a lot of um, there are a few Indians, but there's not a lot of Indians. So
Right.
most of the people don't know what a Parsi is or a Zoroastrian is. So I've got to explain it to them, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty much it.
Interesting conversation to have. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So the third one, what is your favorite place in DC?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm more of kind of I've grown up in Mumbai my entire life, so I'm inclined towards buildings and cities, and DC isn't a lot of it doesn't have a lot of that because I think there's a rule where no building is allowed to cross the height of the Washington Monument or something. I don't know if that's a myth. That's what I've heard. So
Yeah.
don't quote me on this, but yeah, it's so I'd say the downtown area is my favorite area. Really, there's a few buildings. They're not as tall as buildings in Mumbai, but it's a nice area to be around. And also, there's this place called the Tidal Basin, which is basically where all the monuments are. It's a lake or some kind of water body, and that's where we have cherry blossoms in March. And I think
Ah,
it's one of the only places in the US that has natural cherry blossoms. So it's really beautiful at that time.
so stunning. And DC also has a lot of museums. So my fourth question is, what's the coolest museum you've been to in DC?
I probably shouldn't answer this question because I'll get disowned, but I haven't been to a museum in DC. I mean,
Oh my God, you have to change that now in your second year.
I
You have
do, I do.
to.
I've heard the aerospace museum is pretty cool, so that's probably what I'd be taking off first. But yeah, I haven't been to any museum so far.
Okay, we'll come back and ask you this in a year. All right.
Sure.
Most underrated thing about DC for you?
Um, I'd say the food. When people talk about food, of course, you talk about Europe, of course, some of the best food in the world. You talk about India, the best
Yeah.
food in the world, but no one talks about DC. Maybe, of course, people talk about New York, but DC is just such a melting pot of cultures that you have people from all over the world, especially diplomats, etc., who need food from their own country. So we have these incredible restaurants in DC. Of course, they are pretty expensive, but
Yeah.
if you're able to budget yourself well enough, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to go out to these restaurants. And I think the food is I think something that people don't talk about a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Speaking of food, what was the first meal you made for yourself when you were like on campus?
I've only made Maggie, so it was probably that. I've not made anything except Maggie.
Classic Indian
Luckily,
students.
luckily our dining hall is kind of we have an unlimited meal package, which is a part of our dining plan. It's a
Yeah.
part of our fees, and we can't really step it down by much. So
Hmm.
if you're hungry as a student, you just go to the dining hall. You don't really tend to cook. At least that's what I do. I don't know about others, but yeah.
Got it. And what are the dining halls at Georgetown like? What's your favorite thing to eat there?
Yeah, there's only one dining hall, which is it's pretty unique, I'd say, because all of my friends have multiple dining halls
Mhm.
in their campuses. But uh, it makes sense because Georgetown's not that big of a college if you look at it, especially if you compare it to like NYU or Wharton,
Right.
sorry, Penn.
Yeah.
So yeah, the favorite thing I like at our dining hall at Leo O'Donovan Dining Hall is probably this thing called peri peri chicken tenders. I like those a lot. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That sounds
it's pretty nice.
great.
I mean, the food. I'll be honest, the food isn't the best in our dining hall. It's a lot of repetitive stuff, and it's. I'd say that's if you ask any Georgetown student what's the worst part about Georgetown, in their opinion, they definitely say the dining hall. So
Mm.
yeah, it's not all rosy out there, but that's nothing to complain about. I'd say yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And what's the most unexpected thing that's happened to you at Georgetown?
Um, yeah, I kind of touched upon this earlier. The RTs on campus. I mean,
Ah,
the first week itself, I heard these people chanting in what I thought was, of course, in Indian mantras, and I
yeah.
walked in and I saw a whole mandir, and I was like, wow, this is nice. And I actually spend a lot of time at this place. It's called the Dharmic Meditation Center.
Mm.
It's we have murtis of a lot of Indian gods, and we have these weekly artis. We have dinner after that, an Indian dinner. which is of course free. So it's just a bonding place. And like I said, I'm religious, so I find that I find myself going to that place pretty often.
Yeah, that's quite something. It's very unique. And what's your favorite tradition at Georgetown?
Um, there's a tradition that I haven't really experienced, which is
Mhm.
probably my favorite one from based on what I've heard. It's called
Yeah,
Georgetown Day. It's basically the last day of the last Friday of classes in the year.
yeah.
So it tends to be in April or in the beginning of May, but it was pouring this year. So it's basically a day when people bunk their classes and just go out and party, and it's supposed to be a fun time. But it was pouring, and I didn't bother doing it because I had an exam like the next week, so I didn't want to fall ill. But yeah, that's something that I would like to do.
Interesting. Yeah, there's also something called the Hoya's bucket list, no, where there's like a bunch of things that you are recommended to do every year.
I've heard of that, yeah, but I haven't kind of looked into that yet.
Okay, cool.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure uh, there's a few fun ones and there's a few boring things on that bucket list. There's this place called library is called Lao. It's Lao Library, and if I'm not wrong, I think there's uh, a thing on that bucket list which says spend the entire night at Lao, which is uh, yeah, you don't want to do that. I mean, there's people walking in and out of Lao at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. So there's people doing it even unknowingly. But yeah.
And just reflecting on that entire experience of applications, what would your advice be to someone who is now in that same situation and finding out about colleges and applications and figuring out what school is best for them?
Yeah, the last few words you said is the most important thing. You need to figure out what's good for you, where you would fit in. You, as a person, you know what you like and what your habits are, your identity is, and some schools just are not the right fit for you. Just weeding those colleges out early on just takes a lot of pressure away from you as well. I know when I was in your shoes like a year ago, I was applying to a lot of places without really looking at the fine print really. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of a mistake. Don't do that. Just talk to people from these colleges. You'll definitely find common connections. Even if you can just watch videos online, that would really help. So yeah, just figuring out where you think you would fit in and then applying to those places, and just be honest. There's no need to lie. There's no need to put too much pressure on yourself. It's a part and parcel of life, and I honestly believe that if it's meant to be, it'll happen. So just with that idea, just apply and then hope for the best.
Yeah, yeah. So be authentic and to do your research and really figure out
Yeah,
whether that fit exists between the college that you're looking at and yourself and your goals. So
yeah.
yeah, just to wrap up our show for today, if you can tell us what you're looking forward to in your sophomore year this year, going into Georgetown, and what are your sort of goals now in college?
Uh, it's a tough one. It's like those questions where they say, "Oh, where do you see yourself in 5 years from now?" And you don't know what to say. But I'd say the first thing I'm looking forward to doing is actually having a more appealing room. My room was like not decorated at all. I didn't bother doing anything related to decorating my room this year, and I think I need to change that, especially after visiting my friends' rooms. So that's something I need to look forward to. And academically speaking, I think I'm in two clubs. I'm really lucky to get into two academic clubs. So one's a finance club and one's a consulting club. So just looking forward to just giving it my best in the sense that I want to move forward in the ranks in these clubs, because these are like professional organizations. They have positions like desk head and senior consultant and a CEO, etc. So just moving forward in that kind of hierarchy, even though it doesn't feel like a typical organization where you have to report into someone, but just giving it my best there. And in terms of Georgetown, just meeting the new freshmen. I think when I was a freshman, I was really scared. I
Mm.
didn't approach many people, but if luckily a few people reached out to me, and that's how I kind of got to know people at Georgetown. So I'd really like to meet the new batch of 2027.
Oh, that's so great. You're trying to make everyone feel welcomed and, give them what you had. So thank you so much, Farhan. I think we've been able to learn so much about Georgetown through this conversation, and I do have my checklist of questions ready for you in a year's time. So we're going to come back and chat with you for sure. So good luck as you enter your sophomore year soon.
Thank you. Thank you.